In 2025, a 78-year-old Cher remains one of the most enduring figures in global entertainment, still filling arenas and defying the usual limits of age, genre, and expectation. Her career is often summarized through awards and records: an Academy Award, Grammy, Emmy, multiple Golden Globes, and a rare chart legacy spanning 6 consecutive decades. But those milestones only describe the surface. Beneath them is a story shaped by reinvention, survival, and an almost stubborn refusal to disappear from public life. What audiences celebrate as effortless longevity is, in reality, the outcome of constant rebuilding, of voice, image, sound, and identity across eras that repeatedly tried to define her too narrowly. From the outside, she appears timeless. From the inside, her journey has been marked by instability, reinvention under pressure, and the emotional cost of fame that never stopped demanding more. The mythology of Cher is not just about success, but about persistence under conditions that would have ended most careers early. Her life becomes a study in how a performer can be continually dismissed, rebranded, underestimated, and still return, larger each time, as if disappearance was never an option she accepted. A childhood shaped by absence and instability, Cher was born Sherilyn Sarkisian in 1946 in El Centro, California, into a life that offered little stability from the beginning. Her father, John Sarkisian, was an Armenian-American truck driver whose presence in her life was brief and inconsistent, leaving when she was still an infant. Her mother, Georgia Holt, pursued acting and modeling while navigating repeated marriages and financial insecurity, creating a childhood defined by movement rather than permanence. Over the years, Cher would describe a household where security was temporary and often fragile, where relationships changed frequently, and where economic hardship shaped daily decisions. In various accounts, she recalled periods of extreme scarcity, including moments when food and housing were uncertain, and times when she felt emotionally and physically uprooted. These experiences contributed to a deep sense of self-reliance early in life, but also a persistent awareness of abandonment. The instability was not only material but emotional, as trust became difficult to maintain in a world where caregivers and environments changed repeatedly. This early foundation, marked by absence, reinvention, and survival, would later echo throughout her career, influencing both her resilience and her need to control her own identity in an industry that constantly tried to define it for her. Struggling through school and discovering performance as escape. In school, Cher struggled academically, particularly with reading and writing, later understood in the context of dyslexia, though it went unrecognized at the time. Teachers often misinterpreted her difficulties as a lack of intelligence or effort, and she has described feeling isolated in classrooms where she could not keep pace with expectations. This sense of being misunderstood created a strong internal narrative of inadequacy during her early years, reinforced by social comparison with other students. Yet within this environment of frustration, she also discovered an escape: performance. Exposure to musical theater, including productions she saw as a child, sparked an intense fascination with the stage. Unlike the classroom, performance offered clarity, clear roles, immediate feedback, and a space where expression mattered more than academic precision. School plays became one of the few places where she felt seen, rather than judged. Over time, this contrast between academic struggle and artistic confidence shaped her identity. While school positioned her as behind or different, performance positioned her as capable and even magnetic. That duality, feeling inadequate in structured systems but powerful in creative spaces, became a defining pattern in her life. It was not just an interest in performance, but an early recognition that identity itself could be rebuilt in front of an audience. Leaving home and entering the unforgiving landscape of Los Angeles. At 16, Cher made a decisive break from her unstable home life and moved to Los Angeles with limited financial resources and no established industry connections. The decision was not supported by those around her, who viewed it as reckless, but for her it represented an escape from a life that felt constrained and uncertain. Los Angeles in the early 1960s offered possibility, but it also demanded endurance. She took whatever work she could find, attended acting classes when possible, and relied on temporary arrangements with friends while pursuing auditions. The entertainment industry she entered was highly selective and often dismissive of unconventional appearances or backgrounds, and she quickly encountered repeated rejection. Casting decisions were frequently based on narrow standards of beauty and conformity, and she did not fit the prevailing expectations of a, quote, typical Hollywood performer. These rejections reinforced earlier feelings of being an outsider, but they also strengthened her determination. Rather than retreating, she continued to audition and adapt, learning how to present herself in ways that could not easily be ignored. The early Los Angeles years were not glamorous. They were marked by uncertainty, persistence, and the gradual development of a persona that could survive constant rejection without disappearing from the industry altogether. Meeting Sonny Bono and the formation of a creative partnership. In the early 1960s, Cher met Sonny Bono, a young songwriter working within the Los Angeles music scene. Their meeting would become one of the most consequential turning points in her life, both professionally and personally. At the time, Sonny was not a major industry figure, but he had connections, ambition, and a developing sense of production and branding. Their relationship began as a working arrangement, with Sonny offering guidance, stability, and opportunities to perform. For Cher, who was still navigating insecurity and instability, this partnership provided structure and access to the music industry. Over time, the relationship evolved into a romantic and professional union, culminating in marriage. Sonny played a significant role in shaping their early image as a duo, focusing on presentation, sound, and media appeal. While this collaboration opened doors that had previously been closed, it also established a dynamic in which creative control and decision-making were heavily centralized. Cher's early career success became inseparable from Sonny's direction, creating a partnership that was both empowering and restrictive. What began as collaboration gradually formed a system where roles were unevenly distributed, setting the stage for both their rise in fame and the tensions that would later define their relationship. Rise to fame and the cultural impact of I Got You Babe. The release of I Got You Babe in 1965 marked a defining moment for Sonny and Cher, transforming them from struggling performers into international pop culture figures. The song captured the spirit of the era with its blend of folk pop sound and youthful simplicity, resonating widely with audiences in both the United States and the United Kingdom. Its success elevated the duo into mainstream visibility, leading to television appearances, magazine features, and large-scale performances. They became symbolic figures of the 1960s cultural landscape, representing a stylized version of counterculture romance and artistic partnership. For Cher, this sudden fame was both validating and overwhelming. After years of rejection and uncertainty, she was now widely recognized and celebrated, her image carefully crafted and broadcast to millions. However, the professional success also intensified the structured nature of her career, as their brand became tightly managed and commercially driven. The public saw a harmonious duo, but behind the scenes, creative and financial decisions were increasingly centralized. The rapid rise to fame created a dual reality, one of public admiration and one of private constraint, where success did not necessarily translate into autonomy. This period established both her stardom and the early foundations of control that would later become central to her personal struggles. Control, constraint, and the cost of a manufactured image. As Sonny and Cher's popularity grew, so did the complexity of their personal and professional relationship. What appeared externally as a balanced partnership was, internally, structured around strong managerial control. Sonny oversaw much of the business side of their career, including contracts, scheduling, and financial arrangements. Cher later described feeling increasingly limited in her autonomy, with decisions about her performances, appearances, and professional direction largely filtered through him. While this structure contributed to their commercial success, it also created emotional and psychological strain. The more visible Cher became, the more her individual identity was absorbed into the duo's public brand. This imbalance intensified as their popularity shifted and evolved with changing musical trends. When their mainstream success began to fluctuate, pressures within the partnership increased, and criticism often became internalized as personal failure. Cher's experience during this period reflects a broader tension between image and agency. She was celebrated as a star, while simultaneously constrained within a system that limited her independence. The contrast between public admiration and private restriction created a growing sense of confinement, even at the height of fame, where visibility did not equate to freedom but instead reinforced the boundaries of a carefully controlled career structure. Breaking point and the legal unraveling of a partnership. By the early 1970s, the personal and professional tensions within the relationship had reached a critical point. Cher began to recognize the extent of the financial and contractual arrangements that tied her career to Sonny's control, including business structures that limited her direct access to earnings and decision-making power. This realization contributed to a growing desire for independence, even as it carried significant risk. When she eventually initiated legal steps towards separation, the process exposed the depth of their entanglement, both emotionally and financially. The divorce proceedings became highly publicized and legally complex, reflecting not only the dissolution of a marriage but also the dismantling of a business empire built jointly but controlled unevenly. During this period, Cher faced significant uncertainty about her professional future, as much of her career infrastructure had been tied to the partnership. Despite these challenges, she persisted in pursuing separation, even as public opinion was divided and media narratives often framed her in conflicting ways. The legal battle represented more than a personal breakup. It was a structural separation from a system that had defined her adult life up to that point. It marked a transition from dependence within a controlled partnership toward the uncertain possibility of self-directed identity and career ownership. Reinvention. Through television and solo stardom. Following the end of her partnership with Sonny Bono, Cher entered a period of reinvention that would redefine her career. In the mid-1970s, she launched her own television projects, most notably the variety show Cher, which allowed her to establish creative control over her image and performances. Unlike her previous work, this platform gave her autonomy in presentation, fashion, and artistic direction. The show became known for its bold visual style, elaborate costumes, and confident stage presence, reinforcing her identity as a solo performer rather than part of a duo. This period demonstrated her ability to adapt to shifting entertainment landscapes, transitioning from music-based fame to television-driven celebrity. At the same time, she pursued a solo music career, experimenting with different genres and gradually re-establishing herself in the recording industry. While not every project achieved immediate success, the overall trajectory reflected resilience and adaptability. She was no longer defined by a single partnership or image, but by a continuous process of reinvention. This phase marked the beginning of her long-term identity as a performer who could repeatedly re-enter the cultural mainstream under new forms, maintaining relevance across changing decades and shifting audience expectations. Legacy, longevity, and the cost of refusing to fade away. As Cher's career extended into later decades, her longevity became one of her defining characteristics. She continued to reinvent her musical style, visual identity, and performance approach across shifting cultural eras, from disco to pop to electronic influences. Each reinvention reinforced her ability to remain relevant in an industry that often favors youth and novelty. However, this longevity also came with physical and emotional costs, including the demands of constant touring, performance pressure, and maintaining a public image under intense scrutiny. Despite these challenges, she sustained a career that defied conventional expectations of aging in entertainment. By the 2000s and beyond, she had become not only a performer but also a symbol of endurance within pop culture history. Her continued presence on stage into her later years further solidified her reputation as an artist who refuses to retire quietly. The narrative of her life is not simply one of fame, but of persistence against repeated attempts by industry and circumstance to define or limit her. Her legacy is built not just on achievements, but on the repeated act of returning, of refusing disappearance as a final chapter. In that sense, her story is less about survival alone and more about continuous reinvention as a form of artistic and personal defiance.